I just read and read and read. I probably read 5 to 6 hours a day.
I read hours every day because all it takes is one little thing to propel you to the next level.
Here in my garage, just bought this new Lamborghini here. But you know what I like a lot more than materialistic things? Knowledge. In fact, I'm a lot more proud of these 7 new bookshelves that I had to get installed to hold 2,000 new books that I bought. It's like the billionaire Warren Buffett says, the more you learn, the more you earn.
Knowledge. Look, reading is important for you. Everybody knows that. Have you ever heard anybody say anything bad about reading? Oh no, it's too straining for your weak little eyes. It's too boring for your feeble brain. No, reading is the one thing that is universally looked upon as something that is good. Other than like eating vegetables. I don't know. Can't think of anything else. And that, specifically, is why we're talking about it today. Do you remember that one kid? Everybody knew at least one kid. It was always like 14-year-old white dudes. That one kid who discovered atheism as a young lad. And when I say discovered, what I really mean is telling everybody that they knew that they were stupid for believing in God. That was the kind of kid I was. I was that annoying kid who always liked to be a contrarian, if you will. Person who opposes or rejects popular opinion. Yes, a contrarian. This is why I need to read books. But yes, I was that kid growing up who took immense pride in rejecting any idea that anybody thought was true. So what better application of contrarianism than what is apparently the holy grail of activities in the minds of every English teacher and I guess all CEOs and successful people. I'm still talking about reading. So we're gonna go over some pros and cons, some goods and bads, if you will, of reading. So let's do a deep dive into reading. So I'd be doing my English teachers a disservice if I didn't start with some of the benefits of reading. Now there's this idea in the educational science community, a very popular idea, something called the Matthew effect. It's essentially compound interest, but for reading. Back in the late 1960s, the sociologist coined this term when he noticed that children who fail at reading at an early age, they become discouraged anytime they have to read. They become disinterested in it and maybe don't take it up as a hobby. They don't build the vocabulary, they don't gain the background knowledge or information about how the world works. Over the course of primary and secondary school, they'll score lower on IQ tests, they'll have difficulties picking up new skills, they become far more likely to drop out of school. Their peers who are better at reading, on the other hand, at an early age, they do take up reading in their free time. They're pushed into more and more difficult books, they're energized by the fact that they're better than their peers, so they read more. That gap between the students who are good at reading and those who are bad gets progressively wider and wider every year. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer is typically how the Matthew effect is summed up. Maybe those CEOs had a point. The reason we're all poor is because we don't read books. But it's a little bit disconcerting. Yes, disconcerting. It's a little bit disconcerting for my hypothesis that reading is actually bad for you. There's literally an effect named for the compounding benefits of reading. But I'm not done yet. I still have the cons to go through, the bads. Before I move into the bads of reading, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the rest of the benefits. According to a number of different studies, reading books, magazines, whatever it might be, can help keep your memory and thinking intact. Reading may preserve brain health and can potentially lessen the symptoms of Alzheimer's and decrease your risk of dementia. It can increase intelligence in children, it can make us more empathetic, it can reduce stress, it can alleviate depression symptoms, it can help you live longer. Of course, it can also help build your vocabulary. Or in other words, your vocabulary gets big. You're welcome. So I'll be honest with you, I have looked far and wide for anything that could possibly be considered bad about reading. And I found nothing. Nothing. There's not a single bad thing that's ever been said about reading. Other than maybe it hurts your back because you're hunched over. Doesn't count at all. Reading has the world's best PR team. So I've convinced myself reading is not bad for you. Did you really think it was going to be bad? You're the contrarian. However, I do want to say one thing. Usually when we think about something as good or bad, it's relative, right? Relative to the usual lazy, pathetic things you do in your free time, reading's pretty good, let's be honest. But what about when it comes to learning things? Really memorizing and internalizing certain ideas. So if you're familiar with like this, I guess it's like entrepreneur hustle culture is how I'd best describe it.
Knowledge.
There seems to be this obsession within that sphere of influence with conflating reading and learning. Like if you read a business book a day, you're somehow gonna become successful, or you're gonna become a CEO, whatever it might be.
Knowledge.
When Tai Lopez reads a book a day, what percent of that book do you think he actually remembers? I know he's not actually reading a book a day, but let's just say he is. What percent of the book do you think he actually remembers? I'm talking about being able to not just understand the punchline of a book, but the premises that lead up to it, the conclusion, the counter arguments, the details and nuances of all the individual discussions. And how many books that you've read can you really say you understand even just a small fraction of those things? Me, like zero. The reason for that is because there's a big difference between active and passive learning. A lot of reading can be very passive, especially if it's well below your reading level, you're not forced to think critically, or you're not asked to really recall any of that information ever again in your life. Research has shown that using the tactic of reading and rereading when it comes to trying to learn something creates kind of an illusion of mastery, but any perceived gains in knowledge actually fade pretty quickly. However, when you force yourself outside of your comfort zone through active learning instead, doing things like testing yourself on the material, teaching others, writing a research paper, all of these things will help you really internalize those concepts and build much more complex and durable connections that will really help you understand the material for a long time. So do I think you're, changing your life by reading a book a day? Maybe.
Knowledge.
Now you might be thinking, okay, Caleb, you're just bitter because you don't read books, you don't have a Lamborghini. Well, to that, I would say, yes, I am bitter. I do want a Lamborghini. And I also should probably read more. I mean, there are clearly a ton of benefits to reading. I'm not debating that. I just think it's important to keep your expectations in check. Reading a Steve Jobs biography is not going to make me Steve Jobs or a CEO, and I'll probably forget all of it in a month. But I do think that reading has the power to change my life in a lot of positive ways. Now, if you were one of the 7 people who watched my last video, you know that I've given up my phone for 30 days. And what I'm finding is that you don't just instantaneously start new hobbies. You actually have to work towards building them. So I was thinking, what better habit to fill my time than with reading? So maybe, if I start reading a book a day now, flash forward a year from now, I'll be a CEO making $1 million a year. While you're sleeping in, I'll be reading. While you're working a job, I'll be reading. While you're doing your poor people things, I'll still be reading. I'll never not be reading. And that's why I'll be so successful. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching. Peace.
And lately I am missing my reflection, and every muddy puddle on the pavement, driving every thought into distortion.